This being our last Sunday in Pitra Paksh, I thought it's very appropriate indeed to share with you another dimension of death. You see, many of us are so very accustomed to think about two milestones. We think about birth and we think about death. Many people say the opposite of death, it is life. But the opposite of death, it is actually birth. And therefore, because we spend so much of our time thinking about our jobs, thinking about education for children, thinking about how do we provide roti, kapra or makan, making sure that all the basic needs are taken care of. From the human standpoint, we think about the journey between our mother's womb and Dharti Mata's tomb. We think about two milestones, birth and death. But today I want you to shift that paradigm, to shift your perspective and to think about not between birth and death. If this is birth and this is death, I want you to think of another milestone. What happens between death and birth? We think about life as birth and death. But how many of us understand what happens in that space between death, after death? What happens, and maybe that space between death and birth again? In scientific language, there's a beautiful word that is called metempsychosis. What is it called? Jai Bhagwan, don't remember that, don't worry. Metempsychosis means dying and being born again. Dying and being born again. It means, according to Shankaracharya, punarapi jananam punarapi. Are jai ho. Are punarapi jananam punarapi maranam punarapi janani jataye. Are jai ho. Bhaje govindam 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 govindam bhaje moramani govindam bhaje moramani. Punarapi jananam punarapi maranam punarapi janani jataye shayanam bhaje govindam bhaje govindam bhaje govindam bhaje govindam govindam bhaje moramani govindam bhaje moramani. Vrindavan Bihari Lal ki jai. Punarapi jananam punarapi shayanam punarapi janani jataye shayanam. Shankaracharya, in the same way that Kabir Das, he observed people. Gautama Buddha in Zen Buddhism. Buddhism came about observation. Ved Vyas Maharaj, observation. Sri Sukdev Maharaj, observation. Everything about life and philosophy came about those great saints and sages observing ordinary people like you and me. And like this, Shankaracharya, when he walked around, he saw that anything that is born in this world, it must die. And therefore, he's asking the question, where were we before we were born? And then the follow-up question is, what happens to us after we die? Huh? In Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavan Sri Krishna, he said to Arjuna, he says, with birth, we think that we are born. Listen to the words, careful words of Bhagavan Sri Krishna in chapter 3. He says, with the birth of the body, we think that we are born. And with the death of the body, he says, we think that we die. You see, from the human standpoint, we associate life and this world based on the physical senses. And therefore, when the body dies, we think that we are dead. No, the eye, the eternal eye, is not dead, but rather the body is dead. The body is dropped. The body is dropped like dirty clothing. It is like maila that is rubbed off the body. And like this, when we drop the body through death, we think that we die. But there's a beautiful statement. I want you to think about this for a moment. If the data in my mind if the information in my mind lives on beyond the death of my body, does it mean that I still survive? I'll ask that question again slower. If the information in my head, Uncle Ramu, continues to stay on after this body has died, does it mean that the eternal I still survive? And the answer is absolutely. We cannot say that I have died when the body has dropped. The I, that which is known as death, you know, in a sentence, those of you who go into big school will tell me that. When you have a comma, what does it mean in a statement, in a sentence? It means it is a pause. When you have a colon, what does it mean? It is not the end, it means you are introducing something else. When you have a semicolon, well, Baba, stop now, we understand. But when you have a full stop, what does it mean? It means, Jai Bhagwan, Shanti, 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 finish. Full stop in a sentence means end, the end. Death of the physical body, it is like that, comma, in the sentence of the soul's journey. It is not the end, it is a pause in the continued journey of that soul. So, what happens between death and birth? So many options according to Garud Puran. I recently listened to an American woman whose husband is from Malaysia. And in Malaysia, their customs are so very different. And I'll tell you what their customs are in a little while. But she started her speech by saying, do you know that every single person dies or experiences death at least one time in their life? And I was like, Jai Bhagwan, what's she talking about now? Every person experiences death at least one time in their life. I zeroed in on that word, at least. And I thought, how could she say at least once? People die once and then something happens with the soul. And she said, no. She says every single person will die at least once. The at least once means the full stop at the end of your sentence of the body. But some people, they die and they come back. I'm not talking about reincarnation. I'm talking about they experience that which is known as ND. ND means near death. They have died. Doctors proclaim them as dead. They would have shut off the machine and say, call Das, the funeral home, make arrangements, time to go home. Huh? And somewhere between that dismissal of preparing the death certificate, you would hear so many stories where people documented they have seen a light. They saw their deceased ancestors, Ma and Pa and Aji and Aja. As Panditji said last week, his great-grandmother who he never knew physically, she visits him from time to time. He knows what she looks like. You see, when people have near-death experience, the soul, the awareness drops the body, goes into some state of that which is known as Akash. And in that Akash, there is the eternal intelligence. And your Pitras, my friends, those that we offer Om Shri Krishna Arpanam in Pitra Paksh, it is not to the dead, it is to the Pitras who exist in the Akash. That's where our Pitras are. They have merged back with Chidananda Rupaha Shivoham Shivoham. And therefore, those who would have experienced death and come back, they get a glimpse into that Akash. They sense everything that is happening in the non-physical realm, in the Akash, and then they come back. And that's what the author was saying, that individuals, every individual would die at least once. Those who have near-death experiences, they would have died maybe twice. You see? You understand? But today I want to shift your perspective on death. Are we prepared for the death of a loved one? And the answer is absolutely no. We are never prepared. Even the Panditji who sits here, when he experiences death of his mother or death of his father or wife or children, no matter how much Baba could sit here and tell you about death, when I experience it, I know that I am not fully prepared for it. I understand it, but I am not prepared emotionally for it. And in the Malaysian culture, as I was telling you about earlier, do you know what they do? I was telling Hari this sometime a week ago. In Malaysia, when people die, they don't bury and burn, you know. They would embalm that body, and mommy will be put in the house, dress up with clothes and everything, and that body stays in the house. Sits on a chair, not lying in any coffin, sits on a chair or lying on the bed as part of the family. And when the family sits for a meal, guess who they're taking out food for? Mommy. I'm using that as an example. But it is true. I will show you one day if you want to challenge me. And what they do is they keep that body there for sometimes 10, 12, 15 years until they decide it is time to dispose of. And it is a strange custom because in the Western world, and even in Bharat, India, where we have got our traditions from, we dispose of the body according to Garud Puran in certain time. Isn't that so? But in Malaysia, and they were saying the reason for that is emotionally they have not been prepared fully for death. So when mommy dies, we put mommy there and we would treat mommy as though she is sick. And psychologically now, they are now preparing for that phenomenon of disposal. And in Malaysia, birth ceremony, wedding ceremony, anniversaries are not celebrated as grand and as with pomp and glamour as they do when they decide to dispose of that body eventually, 10, 12, 15 years later. Strange custom, isn't it? Isn't it? Very strange. But today I want to bring you back to our way of life, to Sanatana Dharma. And I want to ask you this question. When the physical body is disposed of, where do the elements go? Scientifically, we're told matter is not created, nor is it. Come on, students. Matter isn't created, nor is it destroyed. And according to Sanatana Dharma, life isn't created, nor is it destroyed. The sun gets its energy from the atom that is called helium. What number in the periodic table? No. Tell him, Barun. 2. Hydrogen is the first atom. The second, what it is? Helium. And do you know that the sun gets its energy from helium? The burning of the sun, or that burning phenomenon, it is the burning of the gas that is called helium. And that atom helium that burns in the sun generates heat that we feel on planet Earth. And the plants, through the process of photosynthesis, convert that energy and make it useful for us to not just breathe, but every single thing on this planet depends on plants. Every single form of energy in this world depends on plants for that energy. And therefore, if you ask scientists to define life and death, the scientists will tell you, life is the movement of the helium atom through the sun, by the plants, and then to all of creation. What a very beautiful example of life. It speaks about life from the perspective of energy. And today, as I conclude, I want to remind you that we, this body, it is a localized bundle of energy. And we call it Krishen. And we call it Samantha. And we call Jenny. It is the localized bundle of energy that has come together, and we give it a name. The name of your body. You would say, Baba, Mano Bodhya Hankar Chitta Nidhanam. You know that? I am not the mind. I am not the body. I am not even the name. Then who am I? Chidananda Rupaha Shivoham Shivoham. I am Shiva. I am Shiva. But what does that mean? I am energy. I am energy. I am energy. You see, before we were born, we were in the Akash. We were part of the Akash. But the Akash decided it was time, the information decided it was time for this body to take birth in that family. And that is why this human body came together. And when we die, the body may be disposed of, but the I, the eternal I, goes back into the Akash. Over 100,000 years ago, There was a saint by the name of two saints, Vishwamitra and Vashishta. And if you go now to South India, I would have told you the story before, but I'll put it into context for you. If you go now to Chennai, South India, there is something that is called Nadi. Mati, she can tell you a lot about it. She went with us. There's something called Nadi. Nadi means leaf. And thousands of years ago, every single human being's life was written on leaves, Nadi leaves. And the precision, once they find your leaf, the precision is phenomenal. It's mind-blowing. But the question is, how did sage Vishwamitra know about Krishen before Krishen knew about Krishen? Amazing. How did those sages in their times, when they wrote the life in old Tamil language, when my life was written in the form of a song by a saint who never knew me in the body, but he knew about the life of the energy that is known as Krishen. You see, my friends, how do saints do that? How they do it? It is by tapping into the Akash. When you sit in meditation and you lose yourself, you lose your sense of this body and you get lost in your meditation, in chanting kirtan and bhajan, where some of the saints refer to it as samadhi, where the physical body no longer makes any sense. The Atma, the consciousness, drops the body and goes into the Akash and enjoys energy at a different level. So as I conclude this morning, I'm giving you a glimpse into what you do when you offer Om Sri Krishna Arpanam to your Pitras in Pitra Paksh. You're not offering to the dead. You're not offering to the name of the person, but you're offering to the energy that soul continues to enjoy. The soul has dropped the physical body, but the soul remains part of that energy form that is called Akash. And in the time of the Pitra Paksh, the astrological positions are so very much positioned that the energy connection between the physical human being and the Akash, where our Pitras reside, it is very, very strong. And therefore, when you make your Pitra Paksh offerings to your ancestors, that's the science of Pitra Paksh. It is your energy connecting to the Pitras and Pitra energy between yourself, the human plane, and the Akashic plane. Prem se bolo Sri Vrindavan Bihari Lal ki jai. You see, I would like to share this concept, especially for the young children. In my workplace over the last week, my boss came and said to me jokingly, he said, "Why, what kind of stupidness you all Hindus doing?" He does puja, by the way. He's not a Hindu, he's a Christian. And I go to his home and do puja. But he's asking a question from a very scientific standpoint. He said, people think that they're offering to the dead. I said, no, they're not. And when I explained to him what I explained to you this morning, he said, why don't people say that then? I said, it's because that's what we were taught. That's the simple thing we are offering to our ancestors. But what we are doing is we are connecting with energy from the physical level and to energy at the Akashic level. That's where all consciousness, all awareness, all data exists. And therefore, when this physical body dies, if the data inside of my head stays on and lives on, I will survive. Prem se bolo Shri Vrindavan Bihari Lal ki, Umapati Mahadev ki.